On the mountainside, clouds and mist lingered. One could vaguely see the ancient buildings, as if there was a giant beast hovering above the clouds, looking down at all living things. One could only feel that it was extremely majestic. At this moment, there were quite a number of people who were like pilgrims, devoutly stepping into it. Lin Bai was one of them. His appearance was delicate and pretty, but his eyes were like a deep pool, flickering with a calm light. Perhaps it was because he was a little nervous that there would be a ripple. After all, this was his last chance. Everyone had 5 chances to awaken in their lifetime, and those who exceeded the age limit would never be able to awaken again. You are Lin Bai? This time, the leader was a middle-aged man in his 40s. He looked at the booklet in his hand to confirm Lin Bai's identity. Lin Bai nodded. Yes. The person in charge was a little surprised. Then, he said casually, "Go in. You are quite persistent." Lin Bai stopped in his tracks and walked straight to the awakening hall. It had been 23 years since he had transmigrated to this world. As a person who had transmigrated to a different world from the 21st century, this world was different from the modern metropolis. This world was obviously biased toward fantasy. The 2 main professions were martial artists and beastmasters. Of course, there were other professions, but they were relatively unorthodox and the number of people practicing them was relatively small. Martial artists valued individual strength, training the body, practicing weapons, practicing martial arts, and so on. Beastmaster focused on building a connection with all things, turning them into their own use, and growing together. Lin Bai's physique was not suitable for martial artists, so he could only choose Beastmaster. But generally, adult men and women could enter the awakening hall and choose to awaken their pets. However, 5 years had passed, and Lin Bai had always returned empty-handed. He had never awakened. If he missed this opportunity, he would never have another chance. It was no wonder that the person in charge just now had such an expression. Lin Bai was almost famous in the town. No one thought that he would succeed this time. In the awakening hall, stone pillars stood in the east, south, west, and north. Mysterious totem beast patterns were carved on them. Light flowed in them, as if they were going to come to life in the next second. They stared at the crowd in the hall like a tiger eyeing its prey. In the middle was a huge, transparent crystal. It was said that it was made of ancient, strange stones, and it contained the power of the laws of heaven and earth. The huge formation covered it, as if it was the rising sun. As it circulated, there was a faint pressure that made people not dare to look directly at it. At this moment, there were already many people waiting in the hall. When they saw Lin Bai's arrival, they immediately had strange expressions. Isn't this the person who failed to awaken 4 times? Why is he here again this year? After all, this is his last chance. Maybe he will be lucky. It's still unknown if he would really succeeded in awakening. The discussions were endless. No one had any intention of hiding it. They pointed at Lin Bai and looked as if they were watching a show. Quiet down, everyone. What kind of place is the awakening hall? How can it be tolerated that you all making a racket here? If you don't want to awaken, then get out. An angry roar came from inside the hall, as if a majestic mountain had descended from the sky, pressing down on everyone until they could hardly breathe. The few people who were still talking just now instantly became like cicadas that kept quiet. A tall man walked out from inside, his eyes full of coldness. His gaze swept over Lin Bai, and seeing that he was unperturbed by the favor or disgrace, his expression did not change, but there was a hint of approval in his expression. Han Quan, Zhuo Wenqing, Zhang Dahai. Everyone walked to the crystal in an orderly manner. If the awakening was successful, the crystal would change color, and vice versa. The depth of the awakening of spiritual power would also be judged based on the color of the crystal. Lin Bai. Soon, Lin Bai heard his name. He took a deep breath and slowly placed his hand on the crystal. Even though he had always been calm, at this moment, he was a little flustered. If he could not succeed this time, he would have to live his life as a good-for-nothing. Unfortunately, the heavens did not seem to hear his prayer. After a moment, the crystal was still the same as before. There was no reaction. I told you he couldn't do it. Why try? It's a waste of time. There was a commotion in the line. Lin Bai could clearly feel the gazes on his body like needles. The anger in his heart surged, but he could not get rid of it. The man who spoke earlier could not help but reveal a sympathetic expression. He opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something. In the next second, it suddenly came to life. Buzz! The crystal actually began to tremble. Soon after, a beam of white light rose from the ground. It was so piercing that everyone could hardly open their eyes. What is going on? Everyone was immediately dumbfounded. The intensity of spiritual power was divided into red, orange, yellow, green, light blue, blue, and purple. The awakening hall had stood for 1,000 years, but there had never been a white color. Everyone was dumbfounded as they looked at the scene in front of them. The beam of light shot straight into the sky. Even the people at the foot of the mountain saw it. They looked at each other, not knowing what had happened here. Ding! Binding host Lin Bai, the 10,000 times return system has been successfully activated. Just as everyone was shocked, a mechanical voice sounded in Lin Bai's mind. His pupils constricted slightly, and then he revealed an excited expression. Wasn't this the legendary golden finger? It sounded very grand. It turned out that this 10,000 times return system could transfer the bound person's cultivation to his spiritual pet, and then the system would randomly return it, ranging from 2 times to 10,000 times. Although there were some aspects that depended on appearance, it was not a loss no matter what. Moreover, the most important thing was that the spiritual pet had a certain chance of evolving back to its ancestors. Lin Bai was even more excited after he figured out the function of the system. It should be known that other people worked hard to cultivate, but he only needed to pass on his strength, and he would be able to double the growth. At the same time, his spirit pet would also be able to profit from it. With both of them working together, his combat strength would be several times that of others. It was undoubtedly a time-saving and labor-saving existence. After a moment, the white light gradually extinguished. Everyone's gaze fell on Lin Bai, and then looked at the crystal that had returned to its calm state. They were still somewhat unable to react. I should have successfully awakened. In the end, it was Lin Bai's words that pulled back everyone's thoughts. The few people in charge of the main hall looked at each other in dismay. Their expressions were somewhat at a loss. In the end, it was the man from before who spoke. All right, if there's no problem, you can go. He calmly sized up Lin Bai. His gaze was somewhat inquisitive, but Lin Bai calmly walked out of the main door. With the 10,000 times return system, he could cultivate both martial arts and beast taming. However, the only thing was that since he was young, his family background was ordinary. If he cultivated both at the same time, one could imagine that it would cost a lot of resources. But fortunately, I have the system in hand. Even ordinary spirit beasts can evolve. When I have enough money, I can buy high-grade spirit beast eggs. Thinking of this, Lin Bai already had a plan in his mind. After walking out of the awakening hall, Lin Bai could use his identity jade pendant to go to the side hall to receive the basic cultivation technique. Hey, did you guys see that white light just now? I wonder what happened in the awakening hall. Someone must have awakened their spiritual power. I've been here for more than 10 years, but I've never seen a white light. It's really rare. Then would this white light represent the strong or the weak? When Lin Bai walked over, the group of people were talking fervently. They casually threw basic cultivation techniques over, completely unaware that the main character they were talking about brushed past them. At the foot of the mountain, a middle-aged couple stood there, looking at the buildings halfway up the mountain. Even if they couldn't see anything, they were Lin Bai's parents in this world, Lin Rahai and Su Yun. Both of them looked very ordinary and didn't have much ability. They couldn't cultivate martial arts, nor did they have the ability to awaken it. The burden of life was on their shoulders, and overwork made them wrinkle. The couple had high hopes for Lin Bai. Even though they had failed a few times before, they had never given up. Su Yun paced back and forth anxiously. Lin Rahai, who was next to her, half squatted on the ground and said helplessly, "Can you sit down and rest for a while? You're making me dizzy." It would have been fine if he hadn't said anything, but as soon as he spoke, Su Yun was instantly infuriated. I say, why aren't you worried? I wonder how Lin Bai is doing. Will he succeed this time? While Su Yun was rambling on, Lin Rahai saw a blurry figure walking over. He hurriedly stood up and said, I see Lin Bai. Not long after he said that, the figure not far away became clearer. It was Lin Bai, who had come down from the mountain. When he saw the figures of his parents, he was also a little surprised. Why are you here? The couple looked at Lin Bai's expression and saw that his expression was calm. They did not know whether he had succeeded or failed. Their hearts instantly hung in their throats. Lin Bai cleared his throat and carefully asked, Lin Bai, did you succeed in awakening your spiritual power this time? I succeeded. Hearing this answer, the huge rock in the couple's heart finally fell to the ground. They were instantly overjoyed. Su Yun even handed the card in her pocket to him. There are 150,000 crystal coins in this card. Hurry up and buy a pet egg. As Lin Bai and Su Yun were ordinary people, even if they emptied their savings, they could only squeeze out this little bit from the gaps between their teeth. It was enough to show that raising a pet was an extremely expensive thing. After all, in order to improve the pet's cultivation and skills in the future, they had to throw more money into it. The pet's aptitude went from 1 star to 9 stars. The higher the stars, the better the aptitude. Whether it was a martial artist or a beastmaster, they were divided into Hotian, Xiantian, Grandmaster, Great Grandmaster, and so on. Each large level was divided into 1 to 9 small levels. With this little money, they could only buy a 2-star pet, the most common type. Even so, this was the couple's entire savings. Lin Bai urged, What are you still standing there for? Hurry up and go. If you run out of money, we can earn more. Don't worry about your mother and me. We have hands and feet. We won't starve to death. Lin Bai held the card and felt a warmth in his heart. There was a place in the town that specialized in trading pet beasts. It was located on the west side of the city. It was bustling with activity as far as the eye could see. There were shops on both sides of the street. There were even hawkers hawking their pets along the street. However, the hawkers were too mobile, so there were good and bad pet beasts that they sold. It was very likely that even though a pet was a high-star pet beast, it had an unknown hidden disease or defect. Therefore, it was sold cheaply. By the time the buyers realized it, the peddlers would have already fled to another place and resurface after the heat. There was simply no way to reason with them. Therefore, there was a gambling element to buying at the stall. The only advantage was that it was cheap. If one was lucky, they might run into a high-star cheap pet, but it was very rare. Most wealthy families would choose to go to the store to buy them. Lin Bai went straight to the biggest pet beast shop here. There were all kinds of pets here, and the price was relatively fair. The price was clearly marked on the counter. God-cracking condor, 1-star aptitude, 100,000. Kunwu blood auspicious colt, 1-star aptitude, 110,000. Silver thread anaconda, 2-star aptitude, 160,000. Frost cicada sparrow, 2-star aptitude, 170,000. Even though he was mentally prepared, Lin Bai could not help but click his tongue when he saw the price. After all, with this little money, he could only buy a 2-star aptitude, and it was the kind with average combat strength. A 1-star or 2-star pet was already like this, not to mention a 3-star or 4-star pet. To him, this was simply an astronomical figure. If he didn't have a mountain of gold and silver at home, he really couldn't afford it. Ordinary people could only watch from the side. As for 5-star pet beasts, there weren't many of them. There weren't any here either. It was possible that in larger cities, as long as they appeared, there would be people fighting over them. After all, a mature 5-star pet beast's battle prowess was comparable to a human Grandmaster. It could guard a region of land and provide security. There were even fewer 6-star and 7-star pet beasts. Currently, only martial Grandmasters possessed them, and it was difficult for ordinary people to even catch a glimpse of them. As for 8-star and 9-star pet beasts, they were almost all legendary divine beasts, and no one had ever seen them before. Lin Bai walked around. He felt that it was a pity that he did not have enough money to buy a suitable one. Since he had the system with him, it was not impossible for him to make do with it. Do you have any cheaper ones here? The shop assistants here were well trained, and they did not reveal any other expressions when they heard this. Please wait a moment. Ding. At this moment, the system in Lin Bai's mind made a move. Pet beast with the bloodline of the Azure Dragon detected. Lin Bai's expression changed slightly. The Azure Dragon was one of the ancient ferocious beasts, and its bloodline is extremely noble. He did not expect that this town would actually have its bloodline. I don't want it anymore. After saying this, he left without hesitation. Looking at his hurried back, the shop assistant was a little confused. Lin Bai walked out of the shop and followed the system's directions to the southeast corner. On a shabby black cloth, there were a few pet eggs scattered around. The vendor was dozing off in the corner, wearing a straw hat. It was hard to see his face clearly. Hearing the footsteps, he knew that a customer had come. He immediately raised his head and revealed a warm smile. It is fate that we met. To tell you the truth, the things I have here are very good. I have everything here, such as Azure Dragon, White Tiger, Phoenix, and Black Tortoise. I guarantee that you will be able to contract a divine pet from now on and walk on the path to the peak of your life. He looked at the gray eggs and then at the enthusiastic and cunning peddlers. He was not afraid of bragging. The corner of Lin Bai's mouth could not help but twitch. Just this? The Azure Dragon bloodline? Perhaps the meaning in Lin Bai's eyes was too straightforward. The peddler smiled foolishly and did not feel embarrassed. You don't understand, right? The most high-end pet beasts usually appear in the most ordinary form. How about this? Since we are fated, you can choose any of these eggs. The price is 500,000 yuan. This was too greedy. For a moment, Lin Bai wanted to turn around and leave. He even suspected that the system's instructions were wrong. After all, the quality of the pet beast eggs at the stall was really hard to guarantee. Moreover, the hawker's tone was obviously unreliable. His gaze swept past the egg on the left. It was gray and only half the size of a palm. It was not even enough to fill the gaps between his teeth. It was very inconspicuous and could not be found in a crowd. No matter how he looked at it, it had nothing to do with the Azure Dragon. Seeing that Lin Bai did not respond for a long time, the peddler was a little anxious. Forget it, forget it. We haven't opened up yet today. I'll give you a discount. This is a high price for spitting blood. 400,000. Lin Bai was expressionless. 50,000. This time, the peddler was really going to vomit blood. He probably did not expect Lin Bai to be so ruthless. He slashed down with the dragon-slaying saber and stunned the hawker. He revealed a smile that was uglier than crying. You can't be joking, right? Lin Bai asked in return, Do I look like a fat sheep to you? Only then did the hawker clearly see Lin Bai's attire. It was half-old and not new, and there were balls at the edges. It was obvious that it had been worn for a long time. Even his shoes were the cheapest type of cloth shoes. As if he had lost his temper, he sat back down in the corner and answered very sincerely, You don't look like one. Lin Bai spread his hands and said, Then that's it. Sigh, what bad luck. I hadn't made a sale the entire day. Forget it, let's just treat it as a good relationship today. 50,000 it is. Seeing the dispirited peddler suddenly become lively, Lin Bai even felt that the price of 50,000 was a little high. He glanced at it casually and pointed at the one on the left. Then I'll take that one. The peddler swiftly passed the pet egg to Lin Bai and did not forget to brag. Sigh, I'm not lying to you. Although I sold it cheaply, this divine beast bloodline is real. Lin Bai looked at him strangely. He thought to himself that this peddler was addicted to bragging. If he really knew that this egg had the Azure Dragon bloodline, he did not know how he would feel. When Lin Bai got home, Lin Rahai and Su Yun weren't there. They must have gone out to work. He closed the door and went to the bedroom. According to the system's instructions, he took out a knife from the side and cut a wound on his hand. He dripped it on the pet egg and muttered something. A golden array appeared on the pet egg. There were obscure words carved on it, as if it had been passed down from ancient times. All kinds of beast patterns were faintly discernible and surrounded the entire egg. The room was filled with a mysterious aura. At the same time, Lin Bai could feel an ancient pressure, as if something had been awakened by him. That feeling was fleeting. Soon after, the blood was completely absorbed by the pet egg. Lin Bai slowly opened his eyes, and the contract was completed. He had seen other people's contracts before, and they were completely different from his. Presumably, it was because he had the system. When he thought of the pet beast that could have the Azure Dragon bloodline in the future, Lin Bai was still a little excited. There was probably no other person in the world who had this. After the contract was completed, he only needed to wait for the beast pet egg to hatch. Taking advantage of this time, Lin Bai began to practice the basic technique that was given out. Although it was a basic technique, it did not mean that it was very ordinary. Whether it was a martial artist, a beastmaster, or other professions, they all needed to practice it. Only after reaching the second state would one cultivate other techniques according to one's talent and focus. Lin Bai sat cross-legged and formed a sign with his hands. His expression was somewhat cautious. After all, the most important thing was to build a good foundation. If one did not build a good foundation, there would be more or less problems in the future cultivation. A bit of spiritual energy gushed out from his dantian like a small stream. It swam between the 8 extraordinary meridians and finally converged into a small river, shuttling through the major acupoints. First, it was Taiyuan, Shenkei, Qihai, then Crooked Bone, Zhangmin, and Guanyuan. Lin Bai only felt the warm current surging, as if he was soaking in a hot spring. All the pores on his body expanded and dispersed. As he breathed and breathed, the spiritual energy between heaven and earth seemed to be pulled by some invisible force, drilling into his body and expanding. Lin Bai had never felt like this before. It was extremely comfortable, and at the same time, the impurities in his body were constantly being expelled. The air was filled with an indescribable smell. Is this the effect of the refining the body with spirit energy? It is indeed extraordinary. Lin Bai could not help but sigh. Unknowingly, more than 10 hours had passed. When Lin Rahai and his wife saw that he was cultivating, they did not disturb him. Kacha! A slight movement came from beside him. Lin Bai suddenly opened his eyes. It was already dark and late outside the window. His gaze fell on the table next to him. He saw a small crack on the pet egg. If he wasn't careful, it would be easily overlooked. It's about to hatch. Seeing this scene, Lin Bai hurriedly stopped meditating and stopped cultivating. He observed the movement of the pet egg. Then, the fine lines gradually expanded like the dense lines on a spider web. A green shadow quietly drew out and quickly climbed onto Lin Bai's arm. Hiss, hiss. He looked at the little green snake that was circling around his wrist, hissing and spitting its tongue. Its eyes were like little black beans embedded on it. They were full of intimacy and trust, making it look exceptionally lively and cute. Lin Bai raised his eyebrows. Azure Dragon Bloodline? There was still a long way to go. There was still plenty of time in the future. The tiny scales felt a little cold, but they were extremely smooth. They were like jade, as if they were exquisitely crafted. The little green snake was not even as thick as his thumb. At a glance, those who did not know would think that Lin Bai was wearing a small green bracelet. Lin Bai thought for a moment and said, "I'll call you Little Green from now on." Little Green was even more excited. It clearly liked this name. Although Little Green looked very weak now, Lin Bai believed that with the system in hand, it was only a matter of time before it grew. After all, Little Green had the Azure Dragon bloodline. In the future, it would be easy for it to evolve and regress to its ancestors. Let's try out the system's functions now. It just so happened that Little Green hatched. H could test the system's 10,000 times return. Lin Bai placed his hand on Little Green's body, and with a thought, he said, "Transfer power." Something invisible connected him and Little Apple together, and an inexplicable power poured into Little Green's body from his body. Whether it was a human or a snake, both of them felt a strange feeling. Ding! You have transferred a day's worth of cultivation to Little Apple. You have successfully triggered the 10 times return. The host has received 10 days of cultivation. Lin Bai could clearly feel that his cultivation state had increased, and it was a completely different level from before. This was only the basic cultivation method that he had been given when he had awakened, but it had already had such an effect. If he were to swap to a better cultivation method, one could imagine how effective it would be. Right now, the most pressing matter was where to obtain a better cultivation method. When Lin Bai opened his eyes again, the sky was already the color of a fish's belly. Unknowingly, he had been cultivating all night. Not only did he not feel tired at all, he felt refreshed instead. Hiss, Little Green, who was at the side, was like a green branch and leaf that was embellished on his wrist. Su Yun had already prepared the meal. She left it at the door because she was afraid of disturbing Lin Bai's cultivation. After he finished his meal, he returned to his room to continue meditating. This feeling of becoming stronger was too good. He took advantage of his opportunity and continued working hard. Night fell once again. Little Green's eyes flickered with green light in the darkness. Its entire body disappeared into the night. At first glance, it looked like two fireflies floating in the air. Lin Bai slowly woke up and covered its body with his big hand. The warm current in his palm touched Little Green's cold body, and that mysterious feeling appeared once again. Although he was imparting his power to Little Green and the spiritual energy in his body was slowly flowing out, the feeling only lasted for a second. Then, a large amount of warm current squeezed back into the meridians in his body like a tidal wave, almost drowning Lin Bai. A mysterious power washed through his body powerfully. Ding! The host has passed on a day's worth of cultivation to Little Green. 15 times of return has been successfully triggered. The host has received 15 days of cultivation. After a moment, Lin Bai let out a deep breath. He could feel that the meridians in his body were expanding. If the spiritual meridians in his body were only the size of a hair before, they should be as thick as a pinky finger now. It actually increased so quickly. Sensing the change in his cultivation, Lin Bai couldn't help but be surprised. Even though he knew the system was powerful, he didn't expect it to be so heaven-defying. Lin Bai looked at Little Green and said with some doubt, "Why do I feel like you've grown up a little?" Little Green seemed to be showing off and kept circling in the same place. Even its scales seemed to have become smoother, like a piece of top-quality jade. The water green color was pleasing to the eye. He couldn't help but touch it. It was cool to the touch, but it didn't freeze people. If it was in the middle of summer, it would definitely be a very good heat-extinguishing divine weapon. You actually learned a skill so quickly. A light screen appeared in front of Lin Bai again, just like the online games he used to play before. All kinds of information about Little Apple appeared at a glance. He had only passed his cultivation to Little Green twice, and it had directly leveled up to Hotion level 2. Moreover, it had comprehended Bind, which was a skill that could temporarily control the opponent. This skill was extremely practical, and the battlefield was constantly changing. If he could bind his opponent, even if it was only for a few seconds, he would be able to do many things. Meanwhile, he himself had also reached Hotion level 3 through the buff. One had to know that 2 days ago, he was just an ordinary person. If others were to know about this speed of advancement, they would probably be scared to death. For ordinary people to advance so quickly, they would have to rely on a large number of spiritual treasures. However, if one didn't have a powerful family background, they wouldn't have such a huge amount of resources. This is really insane. Lin Bai couldn't help but sigh. He was only in the Hotion state, and he could only impart this little cultivation. If he reached the Xiantian state, Grandmaster state, Great Grandmaster state, and so on, through the 10,000 times return system, one could imagine how much cultivation would be returned. With his current progression speed, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to use the basic cultivation method very soon. He had to find a cultivation method that suited him as soon as possible. The next day, Lin Bai woke up early and brought his awakening verification and identification to the library pavilion. The ancient building was located in the east of the city. It had a vermilion-colored green roof, and its slanted eaves looked like an eagle that was about to fly. The trees on both sides of the street were lush and verdant, and the growth rings on the trees were round. It was unknown how many years had passed. There were many cultivation techniques and martial arts techniques collected here, and every awakened person could obtain them for free. This was consideration for some of the awakened people from poor families were cash-strapped. After all, whether it was to buy pet eggs or cultivation techniques, they needed to spend a lot of money. It could be said that money was needed everywhere. Therefore, this benefit was set in a humane way. Of course, it was only limited to one time, as they would have to spend their own money later on. However, most of the cultivation techniques placed in the library were extremely ordinary. After all, there was no truly cheap lunch in the world. You can go in now. After verifying his identity, Lin Bai came to the hall on the first floor. The library was divided into 3 floors. The first floor was filled with Hotion state books. The bookshelves made of high-quality agarwood emitted a faint, strange fragrance. They were carved with simple patterns. It was said that they could keep the books from rotting for 1,000 years and protect them from being eaten by insects. The books on the shelves were dazzling. Lin Bai looked at them carefully. Although they were not very top-tier cultivation methods, they were very complete and had everything. Generally, medium-grade cultivation methods required a lot of money. High-grade cultivation techniques were rare and collected by some ancient families, so they were not easily shown to others. However, even if the cultivation methods here were ordinary, it was enough for people who had just awakened not long ago to cultivate them. Yin-Yang Harmony Technique, Triflower Tripod Technique, 5 Elements Supreme Fist. These were all good, but they were not what Lin Bai wanted. These cultivation techniques were easy to get started with, and it was not difficult to cultivate them. He wanted one with a high threshold. It would be best that it took a long time to cultivate, so that he could use the system to return the cultivation. Lin Bai really didn't expect that he would find it in the corner. It was a light blue book with a cover. Probably because no one was interested in it, it was placed at the bottom of the shelf. If it was not for Lin Bai's good eyesight, he would have almost ignored it. He pulled it out. The words on the cover were drawn with iron and silver hooks. The strokes were like dragons and snakes, giving off a domineering aura. It was as if there was a man who could hold off 10,000 enemies. Perhaps it had been a long time since someone had touched it. The cover was covered in a layer of dust. Lin Bai did not care, and casually flipped through it. Octane Blast. As the name implied, this required one to open up the meridians in 8 directions in order to be able to cultivate. However, for ordinary awakened ones like them, it was already very good enough to open up 2. Opening 4 was considered very excellent. If they did not rely on external forces, such as the effects of medicinal pills, they would not be able to open up these meridians at all. If they were unable to open it, they wouldn't be able to cultivate it. Even if they were able to open half of it, the effects would be extremely poor. Even though the Octane Blast could be considered a mid-grade cultivation technique, very few people were able to successfully cultivate it. After all, the threshold was really too high. It made people feel intimidated by it so much so that it was piled up in a corner and no one paid attention to it. When the librarian saw that Lin Bai actually wanted to borrow this book, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. "Are you sure?" He kindly reminded him, "This cultivation technique is too difficult and you can't grasp it. Why don't you change it to another one?" Lin Bai shook his head. "Thank you. I'll borrow this one." To outsiders, cultivation techniques that were very difficult were tailor-made for him. After returning home, Lin Bai did not even bother to eat. He immediately went into his room and impatiently flipped open the Octane Blast to study it in detail. If it were not for the fact that the Octane Blast was too difficult to cultivate and the starting threshold was too high, it definitely would have not been placed on the first floor. After all, the further he went, the greater the spiritual chi and cultivation required to open up the meridians. However, with the system in hand, it shouldn't be difficult for Lin Bai to open up 8 meridians. He glanced 10 lines in one go and quickly browsed through the entire cultivation technique. Following the first page's introductory guide, he made a strange pose. In just a few breaths, he felt an inexplicable pulling force, and countless spiritual energy drilled into his body through his pores. Light circulated around his body, and countless divine rays revolved around him. One could vaguely hear the cracking of his bones and tendons, as if a pair of invisible hands were stretching his meridians. It was as if he had drunk a mouthful of cool water in the heat of the day. In short, the feeling was indescribable, and he could not wait to immerse himself in it. The amount of spiritual power that he had cultivated today was probably even more than the amount of these few days combined. "I wonder how much will be returned this time," Lin Bai muttered to himself and waved at Little Green next to him. "It's time to pass on the power." Little Green swam to his side very spiritually. Its pea-sized eyes seemed to have a lot of spirituality. It raised its head and hissed, looking very expectant. "Ding! The host has passed on a day's cultivation to Little Green. 20-fold return has been successfully triggered. The host has received 20 days of cultivation." Boom! The majestic spiritual energy was incremented by several times, and flowed like a surging river feeding back into Lin Bai's body. It was as if he had been enlightened. He slowly exhaled, and a divine light flashed in his eyes. For a moment, no one dared to look directly at him. The octane blast began to circulate spontaneously, absorbing all the spiritual energy and attacking the acupuncture points that had not yet been opened. This cultivation method is indeed unusual. The meridians that were originally somewhat blocked and stagnant in the body actually became unprecedentedly smooth. This was the effect of being opened up. In the future, whether it was absorbing spiritual energy or medicinal pills, it would become easier. This time, there is actually a return of 20 times. It seems that my luck is not bad. That stream of air came menacingly. It only slowly calmed down after a few seconds, like a gurgling stream. In the end, it returned to its calm state and was stuck there. The octane blast had actually directly opened up the first 3 blasts. Sensing the changes in his body, Lin Bai was somewhat surprised. This speed was simply comparable to riding a rocket. If this news got outside, he was afraid that it would shock everyone. One could not be this fast even if one was taking drugs. Level 3 was a small milestone. If one reached the next level, there would be a qualitative leap, and the effects would be incomparable. Seeing that there were only a few hours before daybreak, Lin Bai finally fell asleep. He rested up to prepare to go to class the next day. As long as each awakened individual paid a small amount of money, they would be eligible to enter the school. However, people like Lin Bai, who came from a poor family, could only go to the ordinary class. The teachers in the elite class were more powerful, and the things they taught were more comprehensive and detailed. However, it was a pity that they were expensive. Lin Bai came to the front office to register. When the dean saw his information, he could not help but take a few more glances at him. After all, it was rare for someone to successfully awaken after 5 times. He asked in a professional manner, "What is your cultivation level?" "3rd level of the Hotion." For a moment, the dean thought that he was hearing things, and his expression immediately became serious. Young people, don't joke around. After all, he had just awakened a few days ago, and now he was already Hotion level 3. If word of this got out, it would simply be unimaginable. It was almost comparable to those outstanding geniuses in the Imperial City. Lin Bai said with a serious expression, "I'm not joking." The dean looked at the results of the spirit energy test and was momentarily stunned. His gaze fell on Lin Bai, as if he was looking at a monster. Then, he was incomparably excited and decided immediately, "You can report directly to the elite class." Under the dean's warm smile, Lin Bai took the report card and walked towards the elite class. Looking at his back view, the dean couldn't help but smile from ear to ear. With such a good seed in his hands, one could imagine the achievements he would achieve in time. He would be able to add luster to the upcoming academy competition. By the time Lin Bai arrived at the elite class, most of the students had already arrived. The classroom was bustling with activity. Everyone was in groups of 3 to 5, conversing with each other. Seeing the appearance of a new face, everyone cast curious looks at him. He looked so unfamiliar. I've never seen him before. Why are there new students coming in at this time? The elite class started earlier than the regular class, so most of the students had already signed up. It was the first time that Lin Bai was an exception. The dean had already greeted the teacher. The teacher was a middle-aged man named Li Chang'e. He looked amiable and his cultivation was at Xiantian level 5. Li Chang'e nodded at Lin Bai and said, "You can sit here." He cleared his throat and said, "Students, please be quiet. I will explain to you how to better use cultivation methods or martial techniques in actual combat in these few classes." Compared to the normal classes, the elite class valued actual combat techniques more. Everyone had to be assigned a sparring partner. Soon, Li Chang'e sent out pieces of paper with everyone's name on it. It was drawing a lot. The sparring exercise this time is to randomly form teams. It's good to go all out. Everyone must act according to their own abilities. At the same time, remember to not hurt your partners. Some people were happy while others were worried. Some people were happy as they felt they could find their weaknesses in actual combat. Those who were scared about facing stronger opponents and just getting beat up one-sidedly. Please bless me that I draw someone with average strength. I drew Zhao Rue. I'm on the same team as Qin Hongxian. Sighs could be heard from time to time. Lin Bai unfolded the paper ball in front of him and saw the name on it. Qinwu? He could not help but raise his eyebrows. It sounded like a girl's name. At this moment, someone curiously came over. It was a chubby little fatty with a chubby face. He looked very festive. Who did you draw? When he saw the name, the little fatty immediately showed a sympathetic expression. I thought I was unlucky enough. I didn't expect you to be even more unlucky than me. You actually drew her. Is Chunwu very powerful? The fatty looked around before he lowered his voice and said, You don't know. Her identity is mysterious, and I don't know what her background is. Her weapon is a fan, which makes her extremely powerful. In short, she's not someone to be trifled with. When you meet her, you'll know how powerful she is. Just as the little fatty was chattering on the side, he heard Li Chang'an suddenly call out Qinwu's name. Li Chang'an liked to call out to his classmates who had higher cultivation levels to practice with them every now and then. Firstly, it was to put pressure on the other students, and secondly, it was to better motivate them. Here, accompanied by a cold female voice, a woman walked out. The red robe wrapped around her exquisite body. It was actually sewn from the fur of a fire dragon beast. It was said that swords and spears couldn't penetrate it, and the robe was invulnerable to water and fire. It was a rare spiritual robe. The woman's skin was fair, and her delicate facial features gave off a cold temperament. Her hair stood up high, making her look valiant. She held a fan in her hand. It was antique, and the handle of the fan was made of 1,000-year-old glasswood. It was carved into the shape of a beast pattern, but no one knew what kind of totem it was. It looked mysterious and gorgeous. It's said that the face of this fan is made from a Xiantian level 7 sea beast. It's extremely powerful, the little fatty said from the side, as if he knew everything. Chun Wu's face opened, and golden light leaked out. It actually gave off a feeling that it was as sharp as a sword. Lin Bai vaguely heard the sound of the waves, and at the same time, a moist and salty smell assaulted his face. He could not help but praise her in his heart. She was indeed extraordinary. She flew out and swept up streams of air currents. It was as if she could split the air in half. At the same time, the sound of the waves became louder and louder. Some of the students who were close to her even had their clothes blown up. Immediately after, the fan spun faster and faster, as if it had been given life. Everyone seemed to see an afterimage flash past. It was so fast that it was difficult to catch it with the naked eye. Boom! With a loud sound, the rocks not far away shattered, and countless rocks fell. Only then did the fan fall back into Chan Wu's hand. Everyone was dumbstruck, and it took them a long time to regain their senses. Chin Wu's control over her strength and speed was simply accurate to the extreme. If she released all of her power, even a house could be destroyed by the fan, but less rocks. It's only been a few days since I last saw her. I didn't expect her to be so powerful again. Based on the situation just now, I'm afraid that she has already reached Hotian 7th stage, or even higher. Everyone is in the same class. Why is there such a huge difference between people? Everyone was discussing enviously. Only Lin Bai's expression was a little grave. This opponent's strength was indeed powerful. If he didn't improve quickly, it would be difficult for him to win in the official sparring 1 month later. Seeing that the others were still immersed in Chun Wu's stunning attack, Lin Bai left the classroom and walked towards the back of the mountain. He had previously discovered an abandoned basement there. Not only was the environment quiet, but it was also rather desolate. It was the most suitable for cultivation breakthroughs. Bang! For a few days in a row, the movements of thin ropes would be heard from the back of the mountain. Fortunately, there were very few people here. Lin Bai had been cultivating without sleep or food. As the last few cycles of spiritual qi circulated, Lin Bai slowly opened his eyes, and Little Green, who was dozing off beside him, immediately crawled over. Lin Bai frowned. He had encountered a bottleneck in the past few days of cultivation. He had a feeling that no matter how he cultivated, it would be difficult for him to break through. Right now, he was like a bottle full of water. He just lacked an opportunity. Looks like I won't be able to just cultivate in seclusion. I still need to have some actual combat. After thinking for a while, Lin Hai set his eyes on the misty forest outside the city. He acted upon this, immediately called out to Little Green beside him. The misty forest, as its name implied, was named this way because it was shrouded in mist all year round. In addition, it occupied an extremely large area, and the trees formed a sea. It was very easy for people to lose their way if they walked in, hence it had this name. Furthermore, there were many ferocious beasts in the forest, and ordinary people wouldn't dare to enter easily. The deeper one ventured into the forest, the stronger the ferocious beasts became. It was said that there were even Grandmasters among them. If it was before, Lin Bai wouldn't have dared to take the risk. After all, he was just an ordinary person. However, things were different now. With his Hotion level 3 strength and Little Green's help, it shouldn't be a problem for him to venture into the outer area. Just as he neared the outer regions, there was already a layer of faint fog. However, it wasn't obvious. Stepping into the forest, he could clearly feel that the temperature here was a little low. The surroundings were filled with towering trees that reached into the clouds, almost blocking out the sunlight. Tiny shadows fell from the gaps between the leaves, and Lin Bai's footsteps came to a halt. He seemed to have heard some movement not too far away. Even Little Green, who was originally wrapped around his wrist, had moved to his shoulder. It stood up high and stared ahead. The bushes that were half the height of a human rustled. Both Lin Bai and Little Green were on guard. It was too late. A black boar that was half the height of a human dashed out. Its sharp fangs flashed in the air, and its fur was slippery. It kept digging at the ground with its hooves. It stared at Lin Bai like a tiger and rushed over like lightning. Lin Bai shouted loudly, "Little Green, bind!" In the next second, Little Green's eyes flashed with a green light. The ferocious wild boar was instantly stunned on the spot, as if it was restrained by some inexplicable power. Then, Lin Bai clenched his fists and punched out without hesitation. Octane Blast. The wild boar let out a miserable cry, and its huge body instantly flew dozens of meters away, crushing a few big trees. It laid on the ground and twitched for a moment before finally stopping its movement. Lin Bai walked over. The black wild boar's skin was rough and thick, and its defense was strong. An ordinary person would have a tough time dealing with it, but who would have thought that it would not be able to last even one round with him? He looked at his own hand and could not help but click his tongue. As expected of the reputation of Octane Blast. Moreover, it was a perfect match with Little Green's bind skill, killing people in an invisible manner. Lin Bai took out the tools that he had brought along with him. He peeled off the skin, extracted the flesh, and collected the materials. This way, not only could he cultivate, but he could also sell it for money. It was killing two birds with one stone. The wild boar's entire body was full of treasures. With so many items to harvest, it could be sold at a decent price. With a rough understanding of his own strength, Lin Bai was even more confident. After finishing off the wild boar, he was ready to continue on his journey. He did not encounter any ferocious beasts after that. They were nothing more than small animals like rabbits and wild deer that did not have any offensive power. After a short rest, Lin Bai was ready to impart his cultivation to Little Green. Ding! The host has imparted 2 days of cultivation to Little Green. Successfully triggered 10 times return. The host has obtained 20 days of cultivation. The results this time were obvious. Not only had Little Green leveled up to Hotion level 3, but it had also comprehended a new skill, Suppression. This was probably due to its Azure Dragon bloodline beginning to grow. Even Lin Bai could feel that he was on the verge of a breakthrough. Lin Bai wandered around the outer perimeter. For some reason, other than the wild boars at the beginning, there were only small animals behind him. He did not even have the interest to fight. His gaze could not help but fall into the depths of the dense forest, with a hint of eagerness. Should I go take a look around the inner area? It was said that risk and opportunity coexisted. With his current strength, even if he could not win, it should not be a problem for him to run. Moreover, he would not go too deep into the forest. After Lin Bai made up his mind, he walked along the path towards the inner area. It had probably been a long time since anyone had walked this path. The traces left by the footsteps on the ground were almost indistinct. In addition to the cover of dead branches and leaves, It looked no different from the other areas. The deeper they went, the taller the trees became, almost blocking out the sun and sky. The light inside was dim, and the intertwined vegetation interweaved together, like an unknown giant beast opening its bloody mouth. The faint roar of a beast could be heard. Those who were slightly more timid might have already started to retreat, but Lin Bai's footsteps were neither fast nor slow. Suddenly, he frowned. A few deep pits appeared not far in front of him. He walked over to take a look and said uncertainly, "It should be the footprints left by the golden iron bull or the one-horned winged horse." These marks looked like they had been there for a few days, and the soil beside them had long dried up. It was likely that he would not bump into them. After all, with his current strength, it would still be a little tricky to deal with these marks. Even so, Lin Bai did not dare to let his guard down. He was even more alert. Hiss hiss. At this moment, Little Green suddenly stood up. Its small eyes were fixed in the southeast direction. Its body was like a tight bowstring, and its head was slightly lowered. This was the state of an attack made when it was in danger. Lin Bai followed its line of sight. In the green leaves, a pair of scarlet beast eyes had unknowingly appeared. The cold glint and bloodlust in its eyes made people shudder. He did not know how long it had been hiding here. Now that it had been discovered by Lin Bai, it no longer hid itself. Moo! Accompanied by a furious roar, the ground trembled violently. The creature rampaged, and the trees cracked. A yak that was as big as an elephant rushed out. Even Lin Bai felt a great pressure. This was actually a berserk yak. The violent aura was even worse than the wild boar and the howling moon skywolf from before. His eyes focused, and his gaze was unprecedentedly serious. It probably has a cultivation state of Hotian realm level 5, or even more. Those who had gone mad could reach level 6 to 7. Even now, Lin Bai could not retreat. The surroundings were full of shrubs and withered vines, and the terrain was very disadvantageous to him. Moreover, the speed of the berserk yak was even faster. If he was caught by it, the battle would be even more passive. It would be better to take the initiative to attack. Lin Bai did not dare to underestimate it, and immediately assumed a battle stance. It was as if the yak had been angered by his actions. The yak kicked its front hooves, and instantly shot out like a sharp sword. Its speed was so fast that it was difficult to catch it with the naked eye. Fortunately, Lin Bai was already prepared. His figure flashed, and he narrowly avoided it. Boom! Its blood-red eyes stared at Lin Bai, and it kept breathing out air from its nose. The hooves of the berserk yak stomped on the ground, and a huge rock was instantly smashed into pieces. One could imagine that if this attack landed on him, he would be either dead or crippled. As expected of a beast at Hotion's 6th stage, its strength is indeed not to be underestimated. Lin Bai's eyes did not show any signs of retreat. Instead, there was a burning desire to fight. It's my turn now. The moment he finished speaking, Lin Bai moved like the wind. His 5 fingers formed into claws as he clawed towards the yak's eyes. The berserk yak was just like the wild boar from before. Its skin was rough and its flesh was thick. Its defense was difficult to break through. Only its eyes were its weakest point. Lin Bai circled around the yak's side at lightning speed, dodging the sharp horns that were flashing with cold light. Roar! A miserable and furious cry sounded, startling the birds in the forest. The yak had never suffered such a serious injury before. Even if it wasn't a local overlord, it was at least an existence that could do whatever it wanted in this area. It turned around and wanted to use its horn to pierce the guts of this audacious human. Lin Bai was prepared to fight, but he saw the yak's huge body suddenly stop in place. Upon closer inspection, it was actually still trembling. The originally berserk yak was now like a frightened little quail. His gaze landed on his shoulder. Greenie's eyes were like jade, suddenly emitting a green light that enveloped the yak's body. Although it was small, it couldn't be ignored. This was the pressure that came from the depths of the bloodline. Even if Little Green was weak now, the Azure Dragon bloodline could crush everything. Lin Bai was a little surprised. He didn't expect this skill to be so useful. Little Green was only at Hotion state level 3, but it could actually make a Hotion level 6 berserk yak so afraid. Taking advantage of this opportunity, He exerted his strength and grabbed the yak's horn. He poured all the spiritual energy in his body into it as though he was trying to topple a mountain. The indestructible horn actually broke in a crack. The berserk yak already had a sense of fear. It realized that this was a tough bone that was not easy to gnaw on. It raised its iron hooves and wanted to escape. However, Lin Bai would not let it leave so easily. Rumble. One punch after another landed on the yak's body. Its elephant-like body crashed to the ground, and another wave of dust flew up. Lin Bai panted slightly. He looked at the lifeless berserk yak on the ground, and his expression was a little excited. One had to know that this was a ferocious beast at Hotion level 6, and he was only at Hotion level 3 now. He had crossed 3 realms in a row and killed the yak without any injuries. No one would dare believe him if he told them this story. He slowly exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. The hearty battle did not exhaust him. On the contrary, he felt refreshed, as if something in his heart had relaxed. Lin Bai hurriedly sat cross-legged and began to circulate the octane blast cultivation method. Countless spiritual energies surrounded him and impatiently drilled into his body. When he opened his eyes again, his entire body was filled with a cold aura. It was as long as he waved his hand, he would be able to move mountains and fill the seas. This trip to the Misty Forest was indeed not in vain. I can only make greater progress in actual combat. He had cultivated the Octane Blast to the 4th level. Both he and Little Green had broken through to Hotion level 4. It could be said that they had made a qualitative leap. Little Green hissed and hissed. Sensing its joy, Lin Bai smiled and patted its little head. "You've done great this time." Little Green had played an important role in killing the yak. This time, it had comprehended a new skill, Soaring Cloud, which could greatly increase its own and its speed. Whether it was to escape or to pursue the enemy, it was a very good choice. The sun was setting in the west. Lin Bai looked at the sky and realized that it was already late. Moreover, the light here was even dimmer than the outside. If it was any later, he would not be able to see the road clearly and would easily lose his way. With his current strength, it was still dangerous to spend the night in the Misty Forest. Immediately, he stopped hesitating. He gathered the ingredients from the yak and walked towards the direction of the town. The wild boar meat was extremely firm. Although it had a slightly pungent smell, after being roasted with a special method, it would become extremely fragrant whether it was frying or barbecuing. It would make one's appetite soar. In addition, it could quickly replenish one's strength and was extremely loved by the mercenaries. Not to mention the yak, its entire body was full of treasures. Even its bones could be used. Lin Bai estimated that it could be sold for a lot of money, and this trip would definitely not be a loss. At this moment, the sun had not completely set. The afterglow of the sunset shone on the city wall, as if it was plated with a faint layer of golden light. The market was still bustling with activity, and there were endless hawking sounds. High-quality ink fox skin. Don't miss it when you pass by. It's the best material to make a Taoist robe. Longevity Tiger Drunken Bone Wine. I guarantee that you'll want more. Detox pills, strength pills, healing powder, and all kinds of pills are available. It's a must-have item for family and travel. The price is fair and honest. As soon as Lin Bai placed the wild boar and yak ingredients on the table, someone came to inquire about the price. His skinning method was clean and complete. Soon, the transaction was concluded. Then, all the bones, horns, and other bits and pieces were bought too. He earned a total of 5,000 crystals. With money on hand, Lin Bai did not panic. He went straight to the shop, wanting to buy a basic storage backpack. Not only was it convenient to carry, but it also did not take up a large area. There were too few things that he could carry with his 2 hands. If he had a storage bag, he could hold even more prey. However, the basic storage bag could only store very little things. If he could make do with it now, he could change to a higher level one in the future. Even so, looking at the price behind it, Lin Bai couldn't help but click his tongue. It's so expensive. Why don't you go rob someone? It was only a beginner's item, yet it was already 7,000 to 8,000 crystals. The money he had earned just now was not enough. If it was a higher level item like a storage ring, it would probably be an astronomical figure. Hello. It's a total of 6,000 crystals. After a discount, it'll be 5,400 crystals. Just as Lin Bai felt that it was a pity, he suddenly heard the shop assistant next to him calculating the bill. He immediately asked in puzzlement, "Can I get a discount when I buy things?" Of course. He's an ordinary member of the Martial Arts Association. He can get a 10% discount. If he's a senior member, he can get a 40% discount. Lin Bai had a thoughtful expression on his face. He planned to go and join it too. After the discount, he could afford the basic storage bag. Moreover, he could save some money when he bought things in the future. He hurriedly walked out of the shop and walked toward the Martial Arts Association. There were still many people taking the test. When Lin Bai walked over, there was already a long line. If you want to become a member of the Martial Arts Association, you need to take a test. You need to pay a registration fee of 3,000 crystals. If you pass, you can have it returned. If you fail, you will not be given a refund. 3,000 crystals was not too much, but it was not too little. The main reason was to prevent some people from trying to cheat their way through the test and wasting time and manpower. The test focuses on 3 aspects: strength, speed, and skills. That is, pure strength, speed, and skill. The content of the test will be randomly selected. This was also to raise the threshold, to prevent those who had passed the test from informing others, and to prevent others from taking advantage of the situation. Lin Bai paid the money without hesitation to register his name. With his current strength, passing the preliminary test shouldn't be a difficult task. The others in the line didn't hesitate either. Soon, everyone picked their own test subjects. Those who have chosen number 1, please follow me this way. Soon, a few people dressed in blue walked out. Judging from their appearance, they should be the stewards. There was a faint pressure between their brows. They should be at the Xiantian state. Lin Bai was number 1. At the same time, more than a dozen people walked out from the large line and followed the stewards to the training ground of the association. The place was extremely spacious. There were no other decorations as far as the eye could see. There were only dozens of targets 100 meters away. Lin Bai already had a guess about the assessment content. As expected, the steward said, the assessment subject is strength. At the same time, you have to control your accuracy. This is not an ordinary target, but one made of the hardest black iron. What you have to do is to hit the bullseye and pierce through it. After the steward finished explaining the rules, he signaled everyone to start. What was handed to everyone was not a stone, but a dull wooden chip. For a moment, everyone was dumbfounded. The wooden chip was light and not sharp. It would not even be able to scrape off the iron chips, much less penetrate the black iron. Immediately, someone shouted in dissatisfaction, "Are you asking us to use this to scrape some shillings?" Lin Bai, on the other hand, calmly picked up the piece of wood. The octane blast began to circulate on its own, and all the spiritual power in his body was poured into a few major acupuncture points on his wrist. Swish! The sound of a sharp blade cutting through the air rang in everyone's ears. At the same time, a small piece of wood pierced through the bullseye 100 miles away, directly piercing through the bullseye. The bullseye made of black iron instantly shattered into pieces. Everyone was dumbfounded. They could not believe who it was. Black iron was the strongest material. It was difficult for ordinary weapons to penetrate it, let alone a small piece of wood. Lin Bai had just put down his hand when he received everyone's enthusiastic gazes. The steward's eyes lit up and he said excitedly, "You call this scraping?" The others looked at each other speechlessly. After all, just because Lin Bai could do it, it did not mean that they could do it. Lin Bai walked out of the examination room calmly and proceeded to the next examination. He did not notice the resentful gazes behind him. Seeing that he could do it so easily, the crowd could not help but feel a little more hopeful. Perhaps it was not as difficult as they had imagined. However, when they really started to try it, they realized that they had been thinking too much. The wooden piece was light. If the strength used was not enough, it would fall halfway. Even if the strength was enough, as there were no sharp edges and corners, being able to sink an inch or two into the bullseye was already the limit, much less piercing the bullseye. While everyone was grimacing in response, they were more and more impressed by Lin Bai's move just then. They did not know how he did it. The strength test alone had already eliminated many people. Congratulations on passing the first test. Now it's the second test. I hope everyone can continue to work hard. Lin Bai looked at the piece of paper in his hand. The word speed was written on it. Following the leader, they arrived in front of an empty hall. He could not help but wonder what this test would be like. The light in the hall was very dark. Through the gaps, everyone could vaguely see dozens of blurry shadows inside. There seemed to be people was inside. Creak. Accompanied by the heavy sound of the wooden door, everyone finally saw the scene inside the hall clearly. The 18 lifelike bronze figures were revealed. Some were glaring at each other, some were beaming with joy, and some had tears in the corners of their eyes. Their expressions and actions were all different, and they were all very real. It was as if they were about to come to life. The crowd did not understand what was going on. Other than these bronze figures, the entire hall looked ordinary. There was nothing special about it, so it should not be difficult to pass this stage. With this thought in mind, someone relaxed a little. He even teased, "The stage is speed. Could it be that they want us to race against these bronze men to see who runs faster?" Immediately, a burst of laughter erupted in the hall. Lin Bai was indeed looking carefully at the scene in the hall. His gaze fell on the top. There were a few vague and huge outlines lurking in the dark. They seemed to be gears? Hee hee. The supervisor gave an ambiguous smile and stretched out his hand to pull to the side. Kacha, kacha. The sound of the gears turning startled everyone. The floor started to move. A few pillars rose from the ground while a huge meteor hammer dropped from the ceiling. If they had not dodged in time, they might have been hit in the head. At the same time, all kinds of mechanisms and tools began to operate spontaneously, dazzling everyone. Most importantly, the previously stationary bronze men had changed their positions and movements. The only similarity was that their gazes were fixed in the direction of the crowd. Their gazes were truly terrifying. As everyone can see, there are all sorts of mechanisms in 18 bronze man arrays. What you need to do is to avoid these obstacles and successfully reach the other side of the hall. The traps and bronze men were so fast that it was as if dozens of engines had been installed. The person who had ridiculed them earlier could not help but swallow his saliva and subconsciously take a step back. The steward said with a fake smile, "Good luck? Why don't you go?" "No, no, no. You go first." "Hey, didn't you say that this test was very easy? Why don't you go?" I didn't. Don't talk nonsense." Everyone started to push the matter to each other. No one wanted to be the first to eat the crab. After all, doing the test later could allow them to absorb the experience of previous failures. The most important point was that they didn't have much confidence. On the other hand, Lin Bai's eyes lit up. This time, he could try out Little Green's new skill, Soaring Cloud. He stood out boldly. At the same time, a few others who were confident in their abilities also stood out from the line and walked into the trap formation together. Those people summoned their pet beasts. Since they were clearing the stage, they could bring their pet beasts to provide assistance. Everyone was curious about where Lin Bai's pet beast was. However, they did not know that the green bracelet on his wrist moved. If someone took a closer look, they would definitely realize that this was not a bracelet. It was clearly a little green snake. Little Green hissed its tongue, and the green light enveloped Lin Bai's body. His whole body felt light, as if he was going to float up. Chasing the wind and soaring the clouds was not a problem for him. Before everyone could react, Lin Bai had already rushed out. "Wait, what was that just now? I really want to see a beam of light?" Everyone was dumbfounded. They saw that Lin Bai was like a gust of wind, blowing past them. Those traps could not even touch the corner of his clothes, much less hit him. This speed is too fast. By the time they came back to their senses, Lin Bai had already arrived at the other side of the hall. On the other hand, the people who had challenged the stage at the same time as him hadn't even crossed half the distance. Where did this monster come from? Under the envious and admiring gazes of the group of people, Lin Bai walked out of the hall slowly and arrived at the final stage of the assessment. At this moment, there were even fewer people than before. First of all, I would like to congratulate all of you. To be able to reach this stage is indeed not easy. It can be said that the people who remain in the assessment are all very outstanding, but this is far from enough. The final stage was the actual combat assessment. Compared to the previous two stages, this stage was the most difficult and also had risks. One could freely choose to participate or not participate. Those who participated were high-level members, and there was also a reward. Those who passed could split the registration fees of those who did not pass. If they quit now, they would become ordinary members. If they failed, they would get nothing. It was not easy for everyone to get here. Moreover, there was such a big reward for clearing the level. How could they give up so easily? Therefore, no one chose to quit. After the steward explained the rules clearly, he brought everyone to the side of a lake. The surface of the water was shining, and the green lotus leaves were like waves. When the breeze blew, the green waves surged, revealing a faintly discernible wooden bridge. In the deepest part of the lake, there was a big bell that was half the height of a person. Everyone had a bad premonition. Every 10 people will form a group and carry 2 sandbags. The first person to ring the bell will be the winner of the competition. The person who falls into the lake will be eliminated. Everyone looked at the wooden bridge. It was really difficult to say that it was a wooden bridge. There were only about 2 poles that were as wide as a palm. Call this a bridge? It was ridiculous. This match was a combination of strength and speed. Moreover, it was different from the previous one-on-one mode. One had to be wary of the interference of the opponent. In addition to the limitations of the venue, all sorts of factors made it extremely difficult. Very soon, the teams were divided. Everyone stepped onto the single-plank bridge one by one. With the order of the steward, it could be said that everyone began to display their own powers. A divine light suddenly appeared, and all the pet beasts and magical treasures appeared. Next to Lin Bai was a man in his 30s. He was the first to make a move. He turned his fist into a palm and struck out, wanting to eliminate him first. However, Lin Bai was as unmoving as Mount Tai. Not only that, the force of the rebound made the man lose his balance and fall into the water. While he was secretly amazed, Lin Bai had already dashed a few meters away. Wherever he passed, the people were like dumplings falling into the water. Splash, splash. Accompanied by the occasional sound of the water, a few stewards were watching the scene. I guess there will be some noise. I'm afraid it will take some time to decide the winner. In fact, one of the stewards suddenly stammered as if he had seen a ghost. What did you say just now? His companion felt that his expression was a little funny. I said that this group of people still needs some time. Before he could finish his sentence, he was interrupted. It seems that someone has already reached the finish line. What? How is that possible? The moment his voice fell, dang, a melodious bell sound came from the center of the lake. The stewards looked at each other. Their mouths were so wide that they could stuff an entire egg into them. Their expressions were comical and funny. They stammered. We can't be hallucinating, right? The bell sounded melodious. There was a person standing on the lotus leaf in the middle of the lake. His toes tapped lightly, and ripples spread out on the surface of the lake. His clothes fluttered in the wind, forming a sharp contrast with the other contestants who looked like they were drenched in water. From afar, he looked like an immortal who was riding on clouds and mist. One man, one bell, the color of the water and the sky were the same. His imposing manner was extraordinary. Everything paled in comparison and became his background. I want all the information about this man. Soon, someone passed the information registered by Lin Bai to the supervisors. Their pupils constricted and they couldn't help but rub their eyes, suspecting that they were hallucinating again after hearing things. A few big words jumped into their eyes and they couldn't help but exclaim, "He's actually Hotion level 4. A few of the supervisors were the supervisors of Lin Bai's assessment earlier. When they suddenly saw a familiar face, they recounted what they had seen and heard just now. Only after everyone exchanged information did they learn that Lin Bai always left everyone behind in every test. You call this a Hotion level 4? Who is as freakish as him? Is there a mistake in the information? It's written. It can't be wrong. Besides, we have seen his identity certificate. There is absolutely no mistake. Everyone had mixed feelings. Based on Lin Bai's outstanding performance and strength, they had thought that he was at least at level 6 or level 7. However, they had never expected this. There was a total of 70 to 80 people who came to the Martial Arts Association this time, but only 2 of them had passed the advanced member test. Other than Lin Bai, there was also Luo Qin from another academy. It was said that he was also a famous figure in their academy, and he always ranked at the top in every test. Lin Bai looked at the advanced member card in his hand. It was made of high quality or amethyst, and it looked like it was carved with complicated and exquisite patterns. One look and one could tell that it was expensive. This time, not only did he become a high-level member, but he also received 30,000 yuan from the registration fee. He could even buy the intermediate storage backpack, much less the basic one. Just as Lin Bai was leaving, he heard someone calling his name. The man wore a light blue robe, and his hair was tied up with a purple gold crown. There was a jade pendant of the same color on his waist, and he looked very imposing. Although there was a hint of arrogance between his brows, it was not annoying. It seemed that this was how it should be. He stood at the top of the mountain and looked down on all living things. Hello, I'm Luo Qin. Lin Bai had heard of Luo Qin's name before. He was also a powerful character. He did not expect that his age was not much different from his. On the other side, Luo Qin was also carefully sizing up Lin Bai. His eyes revealed a hint of admiration as he spoke with some regret. I heard them say just now that you're not bad. It's a pity that we weren't in the same group just now. Otherwise, we could have sparred with each other. The 2 of them had not been assigned to the same test point previously, so they did not meet. In your school, the only people I want to make friends with are you and Chenwu. Lin Bai only smiled faintly at this. There's still plenty of time in the future. Their gazes met in midair, and there seemed to be sparks flying out of nowhere. They actually felt like they had met their match. Luo Qin's expression of appreciation became even more pronounced. Then I'll wait and see. After the 2 of them bade farewell, Lin Bai went straight back to the store. Without hesitation, he chose an intermediate storage backpack. Not only did it have a larger capacity, but it also had a better preservation effect. Looking at the high-level membership card that Lin Bai showed him, the shop assistant stared at him for a long time and couldn't help but mutter to himself. Strange. This person even asked me about the membership card before, but he became a high-level member so quickly. He scratched his head and was puzzled. After all, everyone knew that the high-level membership card of the Martial Arts Association was notoriously difficult to obtain. It was considered very good if only a few people in 100 had it. Moreover, the advanced membership card was bound to the person's identity and had to be used by the person himself. Therefore, it was impossible to use other people recklessly. After buying it, there was still half of the money left. Lin Bai was not in a hurry to go home and continued shopping. However, there was a slight movement in his pocket. Little Green stuck its head out as if it was attracted by something. It clung to Lin Bai's wrist and disappeared among the containers in a flash. Little Green. Lin Bai quickly chased after it, but found its shadow by the side of the freezer. If one did not look carefully, one would think that it was a thin and long green leaf stuck to the cabinet. So you are here. Why are you running around making it hard for me to find you? Normally, Little Green would have returned to Lin Bai's side a long time ago. However, it was staring at the freezer with its eyes fixed on it. White gas kept coming out of the freezer and accompanied by waves of coldness. Lin Bai did not know what was in it, but it was actually so attractive to Little Green. While he was puzzled, a shop assistant came over and explained, "This is spiritual water. It can effectively improve the quality of the pet beast in all aspects." No wonder it made Little Green salivate. So it was such a good thing. Lin Bai could not help but laugh. You really know how to find it. You can even smell it out. Even a dog's nose is not as sharp as yours. Little Qing raised the tip of her tail and circled around Lin Bai's hand in a fawning manner. Her eyes were filled with anticipation. With such a cute expression, he believed that no one would refuse. How much? 2,000 per bottle. Upon hearing this price, Lin Bai immediately revealed a pained expression. Moreover, the entire bottle was not big. Even then, he still gritted his teeth and said, "Give me 10 bottles." Hearing this, the shop assistant's smile became even more enthusiastic. "Okay, I'll wrap it up for you right away." Lin Bai had spent all the money he had earned previously. He brought the intermediate storage bag and the medicine back home. Little Green's tail was wrapped around the medicine bottle. On the way, it was reluctant to leave, as if fearing that someone would snatch it away from it. He fed Little Green a dozen drops first, but who would have thought that it would dive straight in? Lin Bai could not stop it even if he wanted to. More than half of the bottle was gone in an instant. Little Green looked as if it was drunk, and its entire snake body became soft. It was not as cold as before, but it was actually a little hot. Little glutton, who told you to be so greedy? Seeing that Little Green was only in such a state because of the effects of the medicine, and that there were no other problems, Lin Bai finally felt at ease and began to transmit his cultivation. Ding! The host has passed on 3 days of cultivation to Little Apple. The 100-fold return has been successfully triggered. The host has received 300 days of cultivation. His luck this time could be said to be extremely good. He had actually triggered a 100-fold increase. It seemed that he would be able to reach a powerful state soon. Lin Bai only felt a stream of air rush into his body and travel around his body in an extremely overbearing manner. His meridians were somewhat sore and swollen, as if they were being continuously widened. The uncomfortable feeling disappeared in a flash. Immediately after, a huge amount of spiritual energy surged into his body, like the warm sun in winter. At this moment, Lin Bai's entire body was emitting a brilliant divine glow, causing people to not dare to look at him directly. When he opened his eyes once again, he slowly exhaled a breath of spiritual energy that was also extremely concentrated. As he examined the condition of his body, Lin Bai was extremely pleasantly surprised. This time, he had actually broken through the 5th level and reached the 6th level. Little Green had also reaped a lot of benefits and reached the 5th level. 100 times increase is actually so terrifying. If I could do it a few more times, the speed would be simply astonishing. Not knowing if it was because of the spiritual water, Little Green had comprehended a new skill after this breakthrough. Headbutt. As the name suggested, this skill was more offensive. Little Green attacked the enemy at an extremely fast speed. At the same time, the area on its head would transform into a layer of armor, giving the enemy a heavy blow. Now, Little Green's body was even bigger than before. Although it was still a small one, and it was not eye-catching when it circled around the hand, compared to when it was just born, the change was still more obvious. Lin Bai's gaze paused and fell on Little Green's pointy head. There seemed to be a slightly bulging small bump there. If he did not look carefully, he would have overlooked it. What is this? He could not help but reach out to touch it. Little Green very cooperatively stretched its head over and rubbed against his palm. It felt a little hard, as if something was about to grow. Now, it actually looked like a flood dragon. Just as Lin Bai was observing Little Green's transformation, someone suddenly knocked on the door. It turned out that there would be a Grandmaster-level lecture tomorrow, and Lin Bai was required to attend. The lecture was held in the largest classroom in the academy. Lin Bai thought that he had arrived relatively early, but he did not expect that there would be so many people already. As far as the eye could see, there were only a few empty seats. When the little fatty saw Lin Bai's figure, he waved his hand nonstop and said, "Hey, over here." After hesitating for a moment, Lin Bai still walked over. The little fatty's name was Li Zichen, and he acted as though he was extremely familiar with him. "Looks like you've never attended such a lecture before. Don't you know to come earlier and take a good seat?" Li Zichen was very familiar with the way. It was obvious that he had attended many similar lectures before. Such lectures were only targeted at the elite students of the academy. Students from the ordinary class very rarely had the opportunity to participate. "I haven't seen you in school these past few days. What have you been doing?" Without waiting for Lin Bai to speak, he continued, "You don't know. Chun Wu has been practicing on the martial arts practice field every day. It's said that she has made some small improvements. You haven't seen what she was like?" Li Zichen was chattering nonstop. He didn't care whether Lin Bai answered or not. For a moment, Lin Bai wondered if it was still too late to change seats. Suddenly, the classroom was completely silent. Li Zichen also shut his mouth and stared straight ahead. The person standing in front of the podium was none other than the dean who had accepted Lin Bai into the elite class that day. "It's actually him," Lin Bai muttered to himself. Li Zichen happened to hear him. He came over and asked curiously, "What do you mean?" Do you know Dean Zhao before? Nothing. Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be able to meet you all here today. I believe that you all already know who I am, so there's no need to introduce me here. Everyone was listening attentively. At this moment, other than Dean Zhao's voice, it was so quiet that a pin could be heard when it landed on the ground. Although Dean Zhao was a Grandmaster level figure, he did not put on airs at all. He was very amiable. In addition, he spoke with humor. He would also quote from the classics and go from shallow to deep. Therefore, even if it was just a basic cultivation theory, everyone did not find it boring. Although everyone here is very talented, in the path of martial arts, it's 99% of sweat and 1% of talent. This also shows the importance of diligence. Just because you are extremely talented, you cannot be lazy. Doing so will only make you fall behind others and become ordinary people. Zhao Shiheng's gaze swept across the classroom. Some students did not think much of it. It was not their fault. Some of the more ambitious ones thought that outstanding talent could crush everything, but they did not know that the acquired diligence was also extremely important. Thinking of this, Zhao Shiheng decided to dampen their spirits. You will encounter many bottlenecks. For example, Hotian level 5 is a bottleneck. From level 5 to level 9, the difficulty of each level will increase. This sentence really hit the sore spot of many people. Many people were stuck at a bottleneck and could not break through. How many people here broke through to level 5? Stand up and let me see. After a moment, only Luo Qin and Chen Wu stood up. After waiting for a long time, there was no third person. Zhao Shiheng said earnestly, "See, it's not so easy to break through to the 5th level, so you guys have to continue working hard. There's still a long way to go." Lin Bai did not like to be in the limelight. He lowered his head and sat inside again, worried that Luo Qin would recognize him. Who knew what he was afraid of? Luo Qin looked around the venue as if he was looking for someone. Finally, his gaze fell on Lin Bai. Wait a minute, he has also broken through. In an instant, nearly 100 pairs of eyes landed on Lin Bai. They were fixed on him, and it was difficult for anyone to ignore them. Lin Bai could only raise his head helplessly. After seeing his appearance clearly, Zhao Shiheng was stunned on the spot. Wasn't this the student whom he had specially assigned to the elite class a few days ago? He had only awakened not long ago, and he had already reached Hotian level 4 in a few days. Now, just a few days later, he was already at Hotian level 5. One wouldn't be as fast as him even if they took steroids, right? Everyone's astonished gazes were within Lin Bai's expectations. Zhao Shiheng revealed an expression that said that he was a promising young man to teach. He felt that he really had good taste back then and didn't let this promising young man slip away. Very good. In that case, those of you who have already broken through, prepare to participate in the assessment in 3 days. Every semester, the Academy would conduct multiple assessments to check on the cultivation of the students. The assessment was considered to be a relatively large-scale one. Regardless of whether they were freshmen or seniors, they could all sign up to take the assessment. If they were to obtain outstanding results, the Academy would place great emphasis on nurturing them. By giving priority to entering the Academy's secret realm, they would be able to obtain more resources and their cultivation speed would also be faster. After Zhao Shiheng finished his lecture, Lin Bai was about to leave when he was stopped by a pair of slender hands. He looked up and saw that it was Chen Wu. "Lin Bai, I want to spar with you." Her clear and cold female voice was like jade in the mountains, but also like an oriole coming out of the valley. Chen Wu stared at him, her eyes filled with fighting spirit. If it was before, Chen Wu might not have taken this sparring partner seriously, but now she had no choice but to take him seriously. Lin Bai was only at Hotian level 4 before, and now he was already at Hotian level 5 after just a few days. This really surprised her. Level 4 to level 5 was a small hurdle. Chen Wu was really curious. How did Lin Bai do it in such a short time? Fortunately, they did not know that Lin Bai's true strength was actually at Hotian level 6. Otherwise, there would have been another wave of commotion. Many students stopped and looked around. Their eyes were filled with gossip. After all, Chen Wu had never challenged someone in public like this before. The boos were endless. "Lin Bai, answer her." "Lin Bai, we support you." Many boys were still whistling. Chen Wu swept a sharp glance over, and they immediately fell silent. One could see how powerful her pressure was. Seeing that Lin Bai did not respond for a long time, Wu could not help but raise her eyebrows. "How is it? Do you want to spar or not?" Lin Bai's expression was indifferent. He did not have the will to fight. He still wanted to go back and continue his cultivation. However, looking at Wu's expression, if she did not get an answer, she probably would not give up easily. "I can't beat you, and I have to continue to cultivate." It was impossible for anyone to believe what she said. Wu saw through Lin Bai's intention to avoid a fight, and her eyes turned cold. If that's the case, she unfolded her folding fan, and a divine light suddenly appeared, as if it could cut people's eyes. All the spiritual power in her body pressed down on Lin Bai, trying to force him to make a move. However, a green shadow coiled around Lin Bai's shoulder, and it was so fast that it looked like a ghost. The green light in Little Green's eyes flickered, and it accurately landed on Wu's fan. Click! The fan that had just been opened was quickly closed by an unknown force. At the same time, Wu felt as if she had been targeted by some ancient ferocious beast. A chill ran down her back, and her shoulders seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. She couldn't move at all. In just an instant, by the time Wu reacted, Lin Bai had already walked far away. Everyone saw that Wu's expression was a little ugly and thought that she was feeling unwell. Her companion asked with concern, "Are you all right?" Wu shook her head and said in a low voice, "I'm fine." Looking at the direction in which Lin Bai had left, there was a hint of doubt in her eyes. Recalling the feeling just now, could it be that she was hallucinating? Meanwhile, Lin Bai, who had already walked far away, revealed a smile and flicked Little Green's head. "You little smartass. It's all thanks to your help that I was able to get away. Otherwise, if I really had to fight with her, wouldn't it be a waste of time and energy? If I have the time, I might as well go back and give my cultivation away." Hearing the words, "give my cultivation away," Little Green's eyes lit up, and her tongue spat out even more happily, as if she was urging Lin Bai to hurry back. Lin Bai once again came to the abandoned basement at the back of the mountain. He sat down cross-legged and circulated his spiritual energy. A faint white fog surrounded him, layer after layer. From afar, it looked like a huge white cocoon. As he breathed, the spiritual energy became purer and rushed into his meridians. If Lin Bai's meridians were like a small stream before, they were now as wide as a river. Even so, a lot of spiritual energy still flowed out of his body, which benefited Little Green. It stretched its body to its heart's content and absorbed the spiritual energy into its body. Ding! The host has passed on 3 days of cultivation to Little Green. 20 times of return has been successfully triggered. The host has gained 60 days of cultivation. Lin Bai opened his eyes. He felt as if every pore on his body had been opened, and spiritual energy flowed through his body like a river. He threw a casual punch to the side. Although the basement was abandoned, it was extremely sturdy. Even the materials used were top-quality ores, so it was difficult for external forces to damage it. However, the ground was shaking and the mountains were shaking. It could fall at any time. If Lin Bai had not stopped his attack in time, there might really have been a risk of collapse. He could only walk out of the basement to avoid destroying his cultivation grounds, he found with great difficulty. Bang! With the force of Lin Bai's punch, the boulder that was half the height of a man actually shattered, as if it was tofu. Even Lin Bai himself was a little surprised. He had no doubt that if he fought a beast that was on the same level as him, they would probably not be able to last more than a few rounds in his hands, even though they were known for their defenses. Since it's so powerful. At the same time, Lin Bai fed Little Green a lot of spiritual essence water. This little guy was also greedy. It didn't reject anything that came at it. It collapsed on the ground as if it had drunk too much. Even its small belly was bulging. "Aren't you afraid that you'll die from overeating?" Although that was what he said, Lin Bai wasn't worried. After all, Little Green had the bloodline of the Azure Dragon. Little Green crawled over and rubbed itself against him. The small bump on its head grew a little bigger. Lin Bai also noticed that there were a few pairs of tiny claws growing out of its belly. Although its body hadn't changed much, The scales on its body had been forged to become even more translucent and emerald green, making it look extremely hard. It looks more like a flood dragon now. From a snake to a flood dragon, Lin Bai was looking forward to the day when Little Green could evolve into an azure dragon. Soon, it was time for the assessment. There were quite a lot of people participating this time, about half of the people in the academy. For our assessment this time, the first place will be rewarded with 100,000 crystals, a martial arts manual and 2 pet skill books. The second place will be rewarded with 50,000 crystals and martial arts manuals, and the third place will be rewarded with 30,000 crystals and pet skill book. The crowd was suddenly in an uproar. They did not expect the academy to be so generous. Compared to the previous rewards, the reward this time was several times more. The format of the competition was also different from the previous ones. It was a one-on-one format, just like the one in the ring. The ring master would guard the ring well, and the others would challenge the ring by drawing lots at random. There were pros and cons to this format. For a moment, everyone had different expressions on their faces. If we were to encounter a powerful ring master, we would be in trouble. However, if we were to encounter a weak one, we might still have a chance. The academy isn't stupid. How could they let you take advantage of this loophole? Didn't you hear the teacher say that the final few ring masters left still have to compete against each other? The students were discussing animatedly over there. However, the first person to appear had already walked onto the stage. It was actually Luo Qin. What? It's actually this demon god? Oh my god, please don't let me fight with him. Everyone was a little flustered. Who didn't know Luo Qin's strength? He was one of the best in the academy, and encountering him basically meant that there was no hope. I wonder which unlucky person will draw Luo Qin. Lin Bai looked at the name tag in his hand. He became the unlucky person that everyone was talking about. Li Zichen revealed a sympathetic look, patted his shoulder, and said, "Brother, your sparring partner is Chun Wu, and your opponent is Luo Qin. Your face is really dark." He actually picked Luo Qin. Lin Bai is said to be a newcomer in the elite class. He seems to be at Hotian Realm Level 5. He has just broken through not long ago, so his chances of winning against Luo Qin are not high. Luo Qin has already broken through long ago. He is now at Hotian Realm Level 6, and his strength is still unknown. It might even be at Hotian Realm Level 7. The gap between the two of them is quite big. How are they going to fight? If he fought anyone else, it would be fine, but it had to be Luo Qin. The crowd whispered among themselves. They did not think highly of Lin Bai from the inside out. Just when everyone thought that he was done for, Luo Qin's expression on the stage was somewhat serious. "I remember that I had hoped to spar with you back then. I didn't expect it to be realized so quickly." "I didn't expect it either." Hearing this conversation, the two seemed to know each other, and the crowd felt a little strange. After all, Luo Qin was relatively powerful, and he disdained to associate with others. He was used to being alone in the academy, and they had never heard of him having any friends. Lin Bai slowly walked onto the arena, and the invisible pressure that he released made Luo Qin frown. This powerful spiritual power was even stronger than what he had seen last time. Could it be that Lin Bai had broken through again? Thinking of Lin Bai's performance in the Martial Arts Association, Luo Qin did not dare to let his guard down. A dazzling white light flashed past, and a cold aura blew towards them. The huge and complicated array on the ground was faintly discernible, revealing a supreme majesty. Everyone could not help but retreat in unison. A huge beast with snow-white fur appeared in the center of the array. It carried the wind and snow as it came. Even the arena shook. It was the 4-star pet beast, Frost Ape. At the same time, Luo Qin also put on a defensive and offensive stance as he waited. Everyone was flabbergasted. It wasn't that they hadn't seen Luo Qin's other assessment tests before, but this was the first time they had seen such a battle. It gave everyone the feeling as if they were facing a great enemy. What's wrong with Luo Qin? He summoned a 4-star pet beast right from the start. Does he still want to let people live? The combat power of this man and beast can be said to have increased exponentially. Could it be that he intends to end the battle quickly this time and kill Lin Bai in one move? The Frost Ape has extremely high agility and attack power. If one is hit by it, it will trigger the effect of slowing down. Frost Barrage is also a sure kill skill. If it hits the enemy, not only will it cause great damage, it will also freeze the enemy into ice cubes and make him lose the ability to move. Everyone looked at Lin Bai with even more sympathy. I wonder what Lin Bai's pet is. Maybe it can make up for the lack of battle power. At least it won't lose so badly. Only a pet beast of the same star level or a stronger pet beast would have the ability to fight. Little Green. Lin Bai shouted in a low voice. The green shadow was like a green vine that twined around the mountain. Everyone tried their best to open their eyes wide. Only then did they see clearly that it was not a green vine, but a little green snake. Could this be Lin Bai's pet beast? Everyone was even more speechless. This 2-star pet beast was not even as thick as an arm of the frost ape. Just this? It could probably be killed with a slap. A 2-star versus a 4-star pet beast. There was no suspense. The level suppression between pet beasts was not just for show. This time, Lin Bai was definitely finished. Looks like there really isn't much hope this time. Go! Following Luo Qin's command, the frost ape was like a white lightning bolt as it charged in the direction of Lin Bai. Its speed was simply hard to catch with the naked eye. Its sharp claws flickered with a cold light. Just as it was about to hit Lin Bai's body, Lin Bai dodged the attack. His body was like a ghost. It was like the ever-changing and unpredictable clouds and mist. Someone cheered, "Good movement technique." Everyone thought that it was some kind of cultivation technique that made the frost ape, which was famous for its agility, unable to catch up to Lin Bai. However, they did not know that it had the buff of Little Green's skill, Soaring Cloud. It's not a good idea to continue dodging like this. Blindly defending won't work at all. When Luo Qin uses his ultimate skill, I'm afraid the battle will be over. Lin Bai doesn't have any hope of winning if he attacks head-on. However, if he wants to find another way to win through movement techniques and find an opportunity to launch a sneak attack, the chances of success are slim. Even so, everyone still didn't have high hopes for Lin Bai. After all, in the face of absolute strength, all unorthodox methods were like floating clouds. Everyone thought that Lin Bai couldn't beat Luo Qin, so he chose to avoid his attacks. They thought he wanted to stall for time, so that he wouldn't lose in an ugly manner. Seeing that his attacks had been unsuccessful, Luo Qin gradually lost his patience. More importantly, others couldn't see the battle clearly and would think that he was going easy on Lin Bai. However, he could see it clearly from the stage. Not only did Lin Bai look at ease, but he even looked a little casual as if he was playing a game. This made him feel a little uneasy, and he wanted to end the battle as soon as possible. Roar! A beast's roar resounded through the sky, and the temperature in the air dropped rapidly. Even the arena was gradually covered with a thin layer of ice crystals. The light blue crystals, with Luo Qin as the center, spread rapidly toward Lin Bai. Wherever the frost ape passed by, it became even colder, as if even blood had been frozen. Countless ice crystals condensed in the air and floated around Luo Qin, weaving into a dense net that enveloped Lin Bai. Even if he had wings, it would be difficult for him to escape. Let me see how you will dodge this time. Even the audience below the stage felt a great pressure. Even the breath they exhaled was stained with frost and snow. They could not help but shrink their bodies and close their clothes. Is this Luo Qin's true strength? The 4-star frost ape is indeed worthy of its reputation. They were all like this, not to mention Lin Bai. Little green scales seemed to have light blue ice crystals. It was as if they would be frozen into ice sculptures in the next second. However, Lin Bai shook his head. I've never thought about hiding. I'm just waiting for an opportunity. What kind of opportunity was it? Luo Qin wanted to ask, but he knew that now was not the time to talk. Could it be that Lin Bai was deliberately mystifying things, trying to disturb his mind? With a hint of doubt, he said without hesitation, "Frost Barrage." Countless ice crystals and tens of thousands of arrows were fired at the same time. The situation on the field was very bad for Lin Bai. The crowd seemed to have already seen the outcome of Lin Bai and his pet being pierced into sieves. They could not bear to see this and looked away. At this moment, a sudden change in situation occurred. Under the powerful pressure, Little Green's eyes burned with a desire to fight. It suddenly straightened its body. Green light descended from the sky and condensed into a huge shadow in the air. It disappeared in a flash. The stronger the opponent, the stronger it was. Little Green was just a little bit away from breaking through yesterday, and now it had finally broken through. Looking at the faintly discernible magic formation on Little Green's body, Luo Qin's pupils suddenly dilated, and an idea flashed through his mind. He seemed to have understood what Lin Bai meant by the timing. You actually... It turned out that Lin Bai wanted to use the pressure of the 4-star Frost Ape to temper Little Green. After all, it was only one step away from advancing to the next level, which was why it avoided the battle in the beginning. Not to mention Luo Qin, even the others did not expect Lin Bai to be so bold in this aspect. After all, it was difficult for a 2-star beast pet to withstand the pressure of a 4-star beast. The slightest carelessness could cause irreparable damage. However, Little Green was different from the other 2-star beasts. It had the powerful Azure Dragon bloodline in its body, so how could it be afraid? The few elders sitting on the high platform also saw through the trick, and their eyes were filled with amazement. I didn't expect him to use such a method to level up. After all, a newborn calf isn't afraid of a tiger. He wants to try everything. As expected, the new generation surpasses the previous generation. Although the others didn't know why Luo Qin's expression changed, they could feel that the atmosphere on the stage was a little strange. Like the calm before a storm, everyone's mood became a little nervous. Little Green's skill, suppression, had been upgraded to bloodline domination. The originally aggressive Frost Ape actually showed a timid attitude at this moment. It retreated a few steps back and actually didn't listen to its orders. What's going on? Luo Qin sensed that something was wrong. There seemed to be an insurmountable gap in front of him, pressing him down so hard that he couldn't move. His circulation of spiritual energy also became sluggish. Bean-sized beads of sweat dripped down from his face. Luo Qin's eyes revealed a rare look of panic. The ice crystals that were originally suspended in midair were actually slowly falling down because they were not supported by spiritual power. The corner of Lin Bai's lips curled up. He slowly spat out 2 words, headbutt. Little Green's head was instantly covered in a layer of dark green armor. All the power in her body was concentrated on her head. Her body was petite, but it was indestructible, like an arrow that had left the bow. The shadow behind her also revealed a mysterious section. Bang! The earth and the mountains shook. Everyone almost thought that the arena was about to collapse. The ice crystals that filled the sky turned into icy rain that sprinkled down. Everyone felt their faces turn ice-cold. At the same time, a man and a beast flew out of the arena. It was Luo Qin and the Frost Ape. Their clothes were drenched, as if they had just been fished out of the water. Everyone was dumbfounded. They had not expected such an outcome. The entire arena was silent. Even the referee was stunned for a moment before he reacted. He stammered as he announced, "This round, Lin Bai wins." The entire arena was silent. The expressions on their faces were strangely similar. It was as if they had seen a monster. Then, an uproar broke out. How is this possible? Lin Bai actually won. What exactly happened just now? I think I saw the phantom image of a giant beast. Could it be that I had an illusion before I woke up? They did not dare to believe what they had just seen, even though they had seen it with their own eyes. They felt that this world had become even more mystical. Little Green was a pet beast with a 2-star aptitude, but it was able to crush a Frost Ape with a 4-star aptitude. Since when did a 2-star become so powerful? I think this is more like 20 stars. Someone couldn't help but tease, but said what many people were thinking. If all 2 stars were as powerful as this little green snake, who would buy those 3 or 4-star ones? It was simply against common sense. Admiration, shock, and confusion intertwined with each other. They all fell on Lin Bai, who was in the center of the arena. At this moment, he was almost the center of everyone's attention. No one had thought that Lin Bai would win. Lin Bai's expression was neither arrogant nor impatient. The few elders beside him saw his calm expression and nodded in admiration. Whether it's his strength or temperament, he is different from others. He is a talent that can be molded. Just now, I saw that his pet beast is a 2-star green snake. It might have some flood dragon bloodline in it. That's why it was able to ignore the talent suppression and affect the Frost Ape. An elder pointed out the secret, and everyone suddenly understood. I was wondering how this 2-star pet could be so powerful. It's because of this. Flood dragons were fierce beasts. They were naturally strong and outstanding combat strength. They could be encountered but not obtained. It was even more difficult for ordinary people to tame them. Since ancient times, only a few people had the ability to tame flood dragons. Although pet beasts with the flood dragon bloodline were rare, there were still some. All of them had outstanding talent and could crush pet beasts of the same level. Although everyone still had doubts in their hearts, the power of the bloodline was too overbearing. They only thought that Little Green had mutated. They did not expect that its bloodline was not a flood dragon, but an azure dragon. Although the two were similar, they were worlds apart. After all, dragons were legendary creatures. A single breath of the dragon was enough to overturn mountains and rivers. Hearing everyone's discussion, Lin Bai merely smiled and let them misunderstand. This could also be used to conceal Little Green's true identity. It could also be considered a trump card. Luo Qin tidied up his clothes and walked over. Although his face was a little disheveled, he did not suffer much injury. Lin Bai stopped where appropriate. But it was because of this that he admired Lin Bai even more. It could be seen how precise Lin Bai's control of strength was. Luo Qin revealed a self-mocking smile, but he was completely convinced. Congratulations, I thought our strengths were about the same, but I didn't expect you to be far above me. You're not bad either. To be honest, if it wasn't for the system, it would have been a little risky to fight Luo Qin. Looks like Lin Bai will be a dark horse this time. He even defeated Luo Qin. I think there are only a handful of people in the academy who can match him. Top 5 shouldn't be a problem for him. Everyone wanted to walk over and congratulate him, but they didn't expect Lin Bai to disappear after speaking with Luo Qin. Strange, they were all here just now. Why don't I see them anymore and all of a sudden? Lin Bai left his group behind. Rather than wasting time here to deal with the crowd, he might as well watch the other people's arena matches. He had always believed that only through actual combat could he improve. Similarly, watching other people's battles would also allow him to gain a lot of insights. Great! Waves of cheers could be heard from the arena not far away. One could only see the heads of people moving about there. There were 3 layers on the inside and 3 layers on the outside, and it was almost impossible to pass through. Lin Bai walked over. An antique fan drew a sharp arc in the air. It was gorgeous, but it was filled with killing intent. It brushed past the edge of the arena. Even he could feel a powerful aura. Bang! A figure fell heavily to the ground. His eyes were closed, and he had lost the ability to fight. Chun Wu wins. The person standing on the arena was none other than Chen Wu. She was still dressed in red, but for the sake of convenience, she had changed into a neat outfit, which made her figure even more exquisite. Standing on the stage, Chen Wu looked like a blooming red rose. She was breathtaking. Her exposed skin seemed to glow, and her snow-white skin and red lips coupled with her exquisite facial features made people forget about her danger. Who will be next? Chun Wu has already won 9 in a row. Who else can beat her? I don't think anyone can beat her. It seems that her first place is well-deserved. We have seen the consequences of challenging her. It's getting carried away unconscious. Who would dare to fight her with such brutality? It's better to save your lives. Hearing the whispers of the crowd, Chen Wu played with her fan casually. Her movements were lazy. She looked around the crowd, but no one dared to look her in the eye. How boring. They're all a bunch of cowards. Hearing this, the crowd didn't dare to retort. They were afraid that Chen Wu would suddenly give them a fan to wake up from their stupor. Suddenly, her gaze paused and met Lin Bai's gaze. It's you. Then, she couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. I heard that Luo Qin lost to you. Although Chen Wu was fighting, the discussions of passerbys drifted into her ears. She only needed to win one more match to win 10 consecutive victories. She was in the mood to fight, and Lin Bai was a good candidate. Do you dare to fight with me? After the victory in the defense ring, the ring master could choose his opponent for the final battle. Lin Bai defeated Luo Qin. The others thought that they were not strong enough, so they gave up. Chen Wu took the initiative to invite Lin Bai. Lin Bai wanted to refuse, but Little Green, who was on his shoulder, was a little excited. She hissed and hissed, and it was hard for people to ignore her. It clearly didn't have enough of the battle just then, and now she wanted to continue. Dragons were like this. Their bodies were filled with a combative nature, and they were not willing to admit defeat. When they encountered strong opponents, they would become stronger. Lin Bai revealed a doting expression and said somewhat helplessly, "I really can't do anything to you." Looking at the two people in the arena, the others were looking forward to their battle. Chunwu had won 9 in a row. Moreover, she had obtained the first place in the assessment before, so her strength was obvious to everyone. As for Lin Bai, he had just become a dark horse and defeated Luo Qin. Currently, his cultivation level was a mystery. He had a powerful beast pet that seemed to have the bloodline of a flood dragon. Although it was a 2-star beast, it could crush a 4-star frost ape. The two of them were evenly matched. For the time being, it was impossible to tell who was stronger. On the arena, a huge magic array lit up. With a long howl, a 5-star god-cracking eagle appeared in the center of the magic array. Its golden feathers sparkled in the air like dazzling sunlight. Its huge wings cast a shadow in front of everyone. Its sharp claws and teeth could tear everything apart. Its ice-cold beast eyes stared in Lin Bai's direction, making people shudder. Lin Bai frowned. He had not expected Chen Wu's beast pet to be a 5-star grade god-splitting eagle. Eagles and snakes were natural enemies. Even if Little Green had the Azure Dragon bloodline in her body, it didn't change the fact that she had not fully awakened it. Furthermore, the difference in star levels was too great. As such, the bloodline domination skill would lose its effect. What are you afraid? It's still not too late to admit defeat. Shua. Chen Wu opened the folding fan in her hand. The beast patterns on the surface of the fan were vivid and lifelike. The dark patterns were like a single eye, staring at Lin Bai like a tiger watching its prey. She gently fanned the fan, and a strong gust of wind blew over. It swept towards Lin Bai with an overwhelming momentum. Previously, there were a few opponents who had been slapped out of the arena due to their carelessness and underestimation of their opponents. Even if the people behind them were on guard, they would not be able to stand against the huge gust of wind for a few minutes. Lin Bai's robe was blown all over the place. If it was not for the fact that he was already on guard, he would have probably joined one of the unlucky ones before him. Chen Wu made a gesture with her hand, and the fan was ever-changing. With her slender hands and the folding fan, everyone could finally see what it meant to have one's fingers as thin as the roots of a scallion. Although the scene was pleasing to the eye, Lin Bai was not in the mood to enjoy it. The strong wind was incessant. It was as if the arena was about to be lifted up, much less people. Even he could not help but take a few steps back. If it were not for the spiritual power in his entire body pouring into his feet and firmly adhering to the ground, he would have already floated into the sky. Chenwu didn't expect Lin Bai to hold on for so long. She formed a spell with her hand, and a vortex was formed on the ground. The strong gales turned into tornadoes. Fortunately, the referee was quick-witted and set up a protective array on the side. Otherwise, the arena might really be lifted up. Even so, the floor inside the arena was all turned up. Everyone was dumbfounded. So Chenwu didn't use her full strength before. If this wind blew on them, a layer of skin would probably be blown off. Lin Bai frowned slightly. If this continued, he was afraid that it would not work out. When the tornado arrived, he would definitely not be able to stand steadily. Bind. Little Green suddenly changed into a green light. One end was tied to Lin Bai's body, and the other end was tied to the pillar beside the ring. Only then did he manage to stand steadily. Hoo hoo hoo. The tornado swept over. Between the flying sand and stones, the color of the sky and earth changed. It blew so hard that people could hardly open their eyes. Chenwu was indeed more powerful than Luo Qin. The storm not only restricted Lin Bai's mobility, but also made it impossible for him to use his spiritual power. If this continued, he would be out sooner or later. With a thought, he poured his spiritual power into Little Green. As if sensing Lin Bai's intention, Little Green swung its tail forcefully, and Lin Bai jumped with the help of the force and successfully escaped from the storm. However, the storm followed closely behind like a shadow. Looks like it's going to be a little tricky. Lin Bai's figure shuttled through the arena, his speed almost becoming an afterimage. As he dodged, he thought of countermeasures. Chunwu's body was also surrounded by strong winds, which were equivalent to a protective barrier. It was impossible to break through her defense in a short period of time, so Little Green's head hammer skill was not very effective. However, before Lin Bai could think of anything, the fan in Chunwu's hand spun again, and countless golden lights shot out in all directions. Mixed with the strong wind, it felt even more ferocious. A strong wind landed on the ground, and Lin Bai narrowly avoided it. A huge crack suddenly appeared on the ground, and he was injured by the chi force. He did not dare to imagine what would happen if it hit a person's body. The people below the stage could not help but sweat for Lin Bai. Chunwu is really ruthless. This is a competition, so there shouldn't be any big problems. Moreover, there's a teacher watching from the stage. I feel that Lin Bai has always been at a disadvantage. If things continue like this, I'm afraid that Chunwu will win. That's hard to say. It's not the last moment yet, so the outcome is still unknown. Lin Bai and Chunwu were trembling on the stage. The crowd was not idle either, and they were discussing animatedly below the stage. Right now, Lin Bai was barely able to stand firm on the stage by relying on Little Green's soaring cloud and binding skills. Little Green's offensive skills were limited, and they could not break through Chunwu's defense. The Bloodline domination was even more ineffective. Although Chunwu is powerful, it's not like there's no way to beat her. As long as I get close to her, her means will lose their effectiveness. If the fighting on the stage was a martial artist, the situation would be much easier. Break through with force. Beastmasters like them were most afraid of close combat. After all, their physical fitness is not comparable to us martial artists in all aspects. Some of the martial arts practitioners below the stage could not help but nod, feeling that these words were very reasonable. However, some beast trainers did not feel good hearing it. Forget it. We are not fools. How could we let you get close so easily? I'm afraid that you will be slapped down by our pet beasts halfway. If you ask me, beastmasters are more powerful than martial arts practitioners. After all, their methods are ever-changing, and they have the support of their pet beasts. They are not like martial arts practitioners who only have brute force. The arrogant looks of the beastmasters were somewhat annoying in the eyes of the martial artists. Originally, the topic revolved around how Lin Bai could break out of the encirclement. Who was better, him or Chunwu? Unexpectedly, they had leveled up the argument to whether a martial artist or a beast tamer was stronger. With your fragile bodies, if you didn't have the protection of your pets, I'm afraid that you wouldn't be able to last more than 15 minutes on the stage. You still have the nerve to say such arrogant words. If you're strong, don't hide behind your pets. This is so funny. You guys are simple-minded and have well-developed limbs. We don't even need to fight you personally. The pet beasts that we summon can crush you. The awakened martial arts and the awakened beast tamers were in a dispute. Both sides stared at the other like black-eyed chickens, trying to prove the power of their profession. The smell of gunpowder in the air became more and more intense, but the people on the stage didn't notice it. Chunwu frowned. If it were in the past, an ordinary person would have been knocked out of the stage by her fierce attack. However, Lin Bai was able to hold on for so long, which was really surprising to her. Although Lin Bai was in a passive position, it could be seen that he was very powerful. It was likely that he would have some other tricks up his sleeve. Her mind moved slightly, and she formed a spell with her hand. At the same time, she waved her fan in the air. It instantly became incomparably huge, and the wind that was fanned out became even more powerful and violent. Even the air seemed to have been split into two halves. Countless floors were overturned, and even the pillars on the side were on the verge of collapsing. Seeing that Little Green's body was starting to tremble, the situation was getting more and more disadvantageous to Lin Bai. Taking advantage of the moment when Chunwu was controlling the fan, Lin Bai finally found the right opportunity. Octane Blast. With a loud shout, Lin Bai's aura changed. He stood firm on the spot and seemed to have transformed into mountains and rivers. No one could shake him. His ferocious fist turned into a towering green mountain and crushed down on Chunwu, suppressing everything with a crushing force. Even the previously violent squall dissipated under the powerful pressure. Chunwu's pupils suddenly constricted. She wanted to defend, but it was too late. Boom! The loud noise on the arena instantly attracted everyone's attention. The two groups of people who were still quarreling with each other just now looked at the scene on the stage and suddenly revealed a dreamy expression. I didn't see wrongly. What Lin Bai used just now seemed to be a martial skill. You didn't see wrongly. That is the Octane Blast. The incomparably huge, deep pit on the stage was a mark that could only be left by a martial skill. At this moment, everyone was staring blankly. Didn't they say that Lin Bai is a beastmaster? How could he still be able to use martial arts techniques? Could it be that he was both a martial artist and a beastmaster? Everyone couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Looking at the broken stage, it was already on the verge of collapsing under the force of their power. It was also fortunate